our video starting, and then the time flies. 2 hours goes so fast. I know you guys know every week. And welcome back to the second section of the program. And you are still here listening to Chicha Wilomi right here on Niger Radio, and it's Mrs. Nipa Niger on Mass Radio. And in the studio with me, I have Dr. Hege Elizabeth. Dr. Hege, thank you for being here in the studio. And yeah, it's an honor to have you with us here. Thank you.
I'm really happy to be here.
Thank you. Thank you. And before we go, we were talking about international law, and we're talking about rules of law and what are the rules. We talk about contracts that states have, and what are the principles of this, just like normal contracts, and how the rules is, and how, if now we're talking about the breach of it, which is seems like something is happening, which is something happened to the contract and there's a breach, but we don't understand, and we're diving into it. And we were talking about self principle, the self governing, because Russia was claiming to liberate.
Yeah.
To these two, I don't even know what to call it, because I don't know. You have to help me.
Yes.
Like how to put it. But Russia said they're liberating people. Okay, that's what we know. But
Yeah,
how
that
does
they
that
are
work?
somehow saving Russian people in the Ukraine and and um, the what they then might try to claim is to say that uh, people have under international law. So not only states have rights and obligations, and individuals too, like we have human rights as individuals, but also a people, a group called a people. They can have also. They do have rights under international law, and that right is the right to self-determination. And um, like historically, this is something that we generally um, speak of when we talk about former colonies.
Yeah.
And clearly, if you've been subject to foreign subjugation and dominance, then that goes against the principle of self-determination. But it does not only apply to former colonies, but then it becomes a little bit more complex. But it has to do with the people. Say, for example, from our own country, we have the indigenous people of the Sami people. In English, and I've also noticed in the Netherlands, they speak about Lapland. But it's kind of like it is not a politically correct term because Lap means like in Dutch a patch. So the people with clothing
with the patches on them.
Exactly.
I didn't know the meaning.
So we actually try to refer to them as the Sami.
Yeah.
And you have different forms of Sami. You also have Sami who live in communities doing fishing, but I think most people perhaps relate them to the people who have reindeer and who live
in the North Pole.
Exactly.
Exactly.
And they live in the northern part of Norway as well. And so they have the right to have to speak their own language, to learn their own language in school.
Yeah.
And the Norwegian Broadcasting Corporation, they have certain programs that
for
are in
them,
their language.
For them. Recognition.
And so on. So if a people within the borders of a country are able to exercise this right to self-determination, then there is no violation of international law.
Yeah.
But if they are not able to do that, then they might have the right to have what is called external self-determination. That means to have their own country.
Okay. To break away.
Yeah. And this is one of the questions that came up with. Actually, there's a case from Canada where Quebec, which is a French-speaking part of Canada, they were considering, like the right of Quebec to be independent. And then it was the Supreme Court of Canada that came up with this idea of that you can have internal self-determination if you can exist as a people and be able to speak French and to live
according to the way they want.
The way you want as a people.
Yeah.
Then that doesn't mean that you don't have the right to
break away
and to be independent. So And the reason why they make it very difficult, like it's not just like if you
I
feel,
want it
feel
and then
like it, exactly. If you feel
not like
like it,
Brexit, not like
yeah,
not like Brexit.
exactly. And you also have in Scotland, you also talk about that, but that there should be, a referendum and
Yeah.
so on. But
Yeah.
but it is because the sanctity of borders is there as a principle, because as we started out by saying, like, the main players in international are states, and so um, you there is going to be a lot of instability in the world if
everybody break up. Yeah.
all the time. So
Yeah. Yeah.
so uh, but the fact what Russia then could have been perhaps arguing is that perhaps that the people there should perhaps be able to have their own independent country, but they cannot just invade and take over.
Yeah.
So the principle of self-determination, it doesn't seem to apply
In this
in
case
this
as
case.
well,
Yeah,
as well.
yeah,
So
yeah,
principle
yeah.
of self, because these not the people, it's Russia trying to come and save them. So
Yeah.
it's different than
Exactly.
if the people are saying we want to go and they decide and they make it in their way.
Yeah.
To break away.
Yeah, exactly. So it's not like Quebec or like Scotland. Yeah.
Thank you for the clarity. So in these cases, then, because I was like, so there is actually under international law there is a rule that's been violated. There's violation. Russia has violated the rules, some rules under international law. That's what we agreed now. But based on these rules, because like it's another thing, like you said, Article 2.1 that says.
Yeah,
Is it
2.4
two
of the
four?
support.
Sorry, I don't. I can't remember.
Article
Yeah,
2.
Article 2
Yeah.
something under the UN that says
Exactly.
there's no rules and there was two exceptions. Is it two exceptions? Like
Yes, there are. But first, I can just read. Maybe it's just interesting to read because
Yeah.
it's a very brief article.
Article, yeah.
Yeah. So the UN Article 2.4 says all members of the United Nations then shall refrain in their international relations from the threat or use of force. So not only the use of force, but also
Also
the
the
threat of
threaten,
force
yeah.
against the territorial integrity or political independence of any state, or in any manner inconsistent with the purposes of the United Nations. And then there are exceptions to the use of force. And one.
Can you please explain that what you just read? Because for the
Yeah.
people that might not like legal,
Yes.
because we have a legal language, so not
Exactly.
everybody have the understanding of
Yes.
the legal language. Yeah.
So if you're a member of the United Nations, you shall not, in the way you're dealing with other states, so in your international relations with other states, so Russia cannot, in relation to other states, either threaten to use force or use force against the territorial integrity of another state.
Yeah.
And so the territorial integrity is kind of like your bodily integrity
Yeah.
in a way.
Your own body, yeah. Like
Exactly.
someone invading your privacy.
Yeah, exactly. And
Yeah.
this is the territorial integrity.
Yeah.
Has to do with basically the borders of Ukraine.
Yeah.
And so they have used force.
Yeah.
That's the claim, right? That they have used force.
Yeah.
And thereby they have then in Ukraine, and thereby they are then acting inconsistent with this. And there are two exceptions to this. The main exception, in a sense, is that the UN Charter came after the Second World War, when there have been so many atrocities, and you just do not want to have war. And so how can we prevent this from happening? Shouldn't we together decide how to establish peace again? And so they gave that role, all the members of the UN Charter, which is almost
country
in the world,
in
yeah.
the world, yeah.
They gave that duty. They decided that it's best for the United Nations, for them, for the United Nations as an institution, to be able to decide how to ensure peace and stability in the world.
In the world, yeah.
So if you, as a country, have, if you're facing the use of force and then I'm going to...
threat, the threat of it, yeah.
Exactly. Then you do have the right to self-defense. and we're going to speak about that. But you, the first thing you do is that you report it to the United Nations.
Okay.
This was
So
in
this is the step. So
1945.
this is the
Yep.
steps that was supposed to
Exactly.
do. How?
Exactly.
Okay.
So in 1945, when this entered into force, there was no internet, and you would have diplomatic correspondence and
Yeah.
so on, right? So
Yeah.
so then you would, let it be known that we now want to take self defense.
Yeah.
But um, you the way it's stated is that states have the inherent right of self defense if there is an armed attack that occurs against a member of the United Nations. So there has been an armed attack against Ukraine. And so you do then have the inherent right
To
to
defense.
exercise to self defense, but that is until the Security Council has taken measures necessary to maintain international peace and security. So the primary role here is for the United Nations
Yeah.
and the Security Council
Yeah. Yeah.
to take steps to ensure that this conflict is resolved.
As fast as possible.
Yes.
How as soon as possible. Or how does that work?
Yeah.
The
So
time factor is in it, or there's not really.
there is not really a time factor,
Okay.
but the idea is that it is not for the main role is lays on the or the yeah it is for the United Nations
To disarm
to
it.
to take care of this.
Yeah.
And that is because you don't, if you have all kinds of other countries stepping in,
Yeah.
then it's going to escalate.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So but up until you have the UN Security Council stepping in,
Yeah.
then you do have the right to defend yourself.
Which is what Ukraine
Yeah,
is doing
yeah,
now.
yeah. They can definitely use force in self-defense.
Okay.
Yeah. So that is clear, and that is actually also something that exists under custom international law. You do have the right to use self-defense, and that self-defense is specified in the UN Charter that you could do that individually or collectively. And so collectively, that would be, for example, what we have in NATO, the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, where you have member states have promised each other that if one of us is attacked or someone uses armed force
against us, yeah.
then we're going to see that as an attack on us all.
So it's one for all.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so that's why it also says that you can use self-defense collectively also. But still, the primary role is for the Security Council. But what, of course, and then, so what can the Security Council do? There, you have then, after having informed the Security Council, you have then the UN Security Council can then there are two things it can do. It can under Chapter 6, but you can have not the use of force, but you can have peacekeeping operations.
Yeah.
But you can, as a Security Council, also authorize the use of force.
Okay.
And that is if the Security Council believes that there indeed is a threat to the peace and so on. But the way this was written was that this is an extremely important decision to make as an international community. So at the time they decided that we can't make this really like a majority of states believe we should do it, but should we have 2/3 that should decide to do it?
Yeah.
Well, what they decided to do was that at least all the what is called the permanent members of the UN Security Council must agree.
Yeah.
And what that means is that since one of those 5 countries is Russia.
So like what you're saying, there's under the UN, there is all the state being a member, but there's also this special group that is responsible for maintenance of what peace and security, which is the UN. This is the Security Council under and this is chapter 6, 7, chapter 7 and 6 and 7.
Yeah.
And when there's war like this, you said there are 5 members, like we said, and in this case, Russia happened to be a member.
Yeah, so there are more than 5 members, and actually there are votes, and it rotates between countries. So Norway just ended its period
Okay.
being a member of the UN
Okay.
Security Council.
Yeah.
Norway and the Netherlands and Italy, there were this voting going on who's going to be now a member of the UN Security Council.
Okay.
And Italy and the Netherlands kept getting the same number of votes.
Yeah.
And so they actually decided, let's split it in two. Which
So
was
then
kind
it's
of nice.
so now it's not going to be 6 then.
No,
Then since it's half.
no, it's always 5.
Yeah.
And then there is another number, a constant number,
Okay.
apart from those 5.
Okay.
Yeah, so you have many other countries are part of the UN Security Council, but they are not permanent members.
Okay.
There you need to vote and so on, and then so Italy and the Netherlands decided to split their period in two. So like first Italy and then Netherlands, or the other way around. But for the 5 permanent members, which includes France and the United States and England and China, Russia.
China is part of it as well. Oh,
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So nothing's going to happen if one of those 5 say no. And of course, Russia is going to
say no in
say
this
no
because
in this situation.
This is a situation where it's Russian war.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
it's not going to vote against itself. So
No.
in this case, so it's a problem now because the UN security, because if one member from the security permanent member says no, then means they it's kind of useless. The security council can't do anything.
They can't do anything.
Okay. So
Exactly.
then what can in this situation, since the UN we're supposed to prevent this war and maintain of peace, can't do nothing because of the issue that is deadlocked with Russia? What other ways can international community, like now I say community, because it's like the whole thing is like a ripple effect because the war is going on in Ukraine, but a lot of people, even in Africa, there's no fuel. I was talking today, they said they have people that they have to pack the cars. There's no benzene, or what do you call benzene? I don't know, the Netherlands thing. Petrol. There's crisis, gas crisis in Africa because most of the time it's all, the world is networking, the market, it's like community of traders, they buy and sell from each other. And now one axis is Russia, which is the one with the gas. And it's already in a bad situation now where it all affects each other. And everything that Russia is doing is impacting the whole world. And the UN cannot do anything. In this situation, what best can, and then you have the issue of also the human rights crisis, where, for example, we see the mass murder. I don't even know, but because I'm not there. It's based on what. So I need to say it's not from me, based on what I saw in the media, because I'm not in the war, and I can only get information based on what I can find. That the people, like you have the civilians and houses, like there are rules on things that even in war they cannot. What is not allowed or who should not be. How the protection of certain groups should be, and in this situation is going on. What can international, because it seems like this contract that Russia made, they decide in the layman language, they decide like we're not gonna just listen to it, we're just gonna do what we want. In such a situation like that, when you make a contract and you decide you just unilaterally gonna do what you want, what can the other parties do in this situation?
So what the international community can do, there are a variety of things, but at least you can speak out and you can condemn, and I think that happened quite quickly. You had, I think, a historic vote of condemnation in the General Assembly, where all the members of the United Nations are
Against,
members. Yeah. And you had just a couple of countries that abstained from
voting. Yeah, I saw China and India, a few other ones.
Yeah, exactly. Just a couple, but there's like many countries, like just a handful did not condemn.
Yeah.
In addition, what you see is of course the sanctions that can be
economic
taken.
sanctions.
Exactly, and you can under international law you have you can be unfriendly, but that doesn't necessarily mean that you violate your obligations. And so that's maybe perhaps the first step you would do. But now that we are facing, a situation so grave as this, you may even consider the possibility of the fact that one state is violating
The other.
international law to such an extent, even though it is maybe not violating your
Space.
your state's interest
Yeah.
or rights.
Yeah.
Um, you might be able to argue that you because under certain circumstances you can as a state use countermeasures,
Yeah.
which is actions that are prohibited, uh, but but if they are in response to another state having violated international first, and you've called upon that state to stop doing it,
Yeah.
and if you act in a way that is proportionate, you may yourself
Take
then
actions.
take action if it's proportionate, then, and that it, of course, itself is not the use of force,
Yeah.
and that it is also not violating any rules of human rights and so on. So the freezing of assets,
The sanctions from the economy, the
exactly,
international economy, the
exactly.
international community, sorry, its
Mhm.
economy.
Exactly. So you have states acting, you have the communities, like so communities of states. So the EU is acting, and then what is interesting is to see that companies are also acting,
Yeah.
and they are not really. Uh, Generally, when we speak about international law, we speak about states having rights and obligations, and individuals.
Yeah.
Individuals also have obligations on international law not to commit war crimes, for
Yeah.
example.
Yeah.
But companies is kind of a little bit of a gray area. But you see that they are actually speaking
working
out.
out.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and withdrawing. So you have Western companies, that are.
Big, the big
shutting down
industry,
their
yeah.
operations there.
Yeah. Yeah.
Exactly. So that is definitely something.
But
Yeah.
that, like you said, like the sanctions, like this are like, because this is like you can't take, like I didn't understand before. I have to sit back and kind of watch, because you read some things but you don't know, because I was in the beginning saying, why is other states not helping? And then I was like, why can't they just go? But then I start to realize it, like they cannot just, because also if they go into this and support by giving even one military, that means they will be part of the conflict then, right? So in such a situation, they cannot physically send their own military to support it. Or is it possible?
Yeah,
How does that spill?
Yeah. So you have the right uh, to use force, self defense. Which is not just individual, but also collective self-defense.
Yeah.
And so uh, you, Ukraine can be assisted by other countries in fighting Russia back. But the problem is that you are afraid. You are afraid of. You may win the battle but lose the war, in a sense that and this is what has been stated from the beginning, that we don't want this to end up in a World War III. So
how is that, like, how can that be how can the other people, like, or state that decide helping, how can this escalate then to how could this be possible? What are the possibilities then? Or how does it work that it could escalate to the third world tree? Because everybody keeps saying it, you see it in the media. How will that happen? How would the scenario that will lead to what kind of scenario are we talking about?
Yeah, no, analogies are sometimes helpful. So, what happened in the First World War, but also in the Second World War? You had in the Second World War, the United States was not a part of the Second World War. You had, Germany. Czechoslovakia and Hungary and so on, and then there was this red line of invading Poland. Okay, that's it. Now we're gonna, and now we're going to be fighting you Germans.
Yeah.
But America was not initially part of that.
Yeah.
But what happened was then you have the movie that some many people maybe have seen with Ben Affleck, Pearl Harbor, in December 1941. Japan attacked Hawaii, Pearl Harbor on Hawaii, and that's of course U.S. territory. And so then the U.S. decided to become part of the war and to help out then, because Japan was with the Germans. And so they decided then to join the war. And so if like say Norway now, it's incidentally we have a Russian border.
Yeah,
It's,
like because the Scandinavians have a kind of border with the Russians. So I heard Finland, Sweden.
Sweden doesn't, but Finland
No?
and Norway do. Yeah, Finland has a huge long border, and
With
it's a
Russia.
very precarious situation. We're actually invaded in the 1940s by Russia, so they are very worried.
Yeah, yeah.
They were very
Very
worried.
worried, yeah.
And so, but so say that we would now, join and fight the Russians.
Yeah.
Then we will, in a way, be one of the members, or we would partake in the war, and so we would then open ourselves up to being attacked by Russia, and then that's how that you would have a world war. Maybe not
But-
all the countries in the world. It's not like all.
But then it increases.
Yeah, exactly.
It increases,
Yeah,
and people choose
exactly.
side, and then it can. Okay, now I see. 'Cause when I read it, I was thinking like because everybody's like, no, but they should not join, because if not, there could be World War III. In my head, I'm trying to see how is helping another state.
Mm-hmm.
Could turn out to be like you're part of the war then. So, but now I understand how it is. And for example, like now, you've talked about various things that now there is an act of omission or breach of contract from Russia, but and this tends to lead to international responsibilities. In this situation, that Russia has violated the rules of international law, has violated the sovereign rules, and then invade the territory of Ukraine. What there as a result, and now the UN security cannot go on because it's actually crippled because of Russia has been a part of the five permanent member. What are other like international responsibilities? Because we talk about IOC and there are rules like there's act and omission, and then there are things. Which rules have they violated? Like when we talk about the international rules, Ariswa, like article of
Yeah, you have the articles on the responsibility of states for internationally wrongful acts.
yeah.
Yeah.
So what rules have in this case can Ukraine go for? Like
Exactly.
what are the is it an act of omission, and what can they claim?
Exactly. So there is.
And
Yeah.
on that note, I'm
Yeah.
gonna take a quick break for
Yeah.
the people listening. We take a music 5 seconds break, and we'll be back. Sorry, guys, the time is going fast, so we have
Totally.
so much topic to talk about. But
Exactly.
enjoy some music again. I will be right back, and we're talking about international responsibilities and what is Russians. What is the position of Russia when we talk on this topic? See you after the break. Bye.
You want some water? I think we've been
Oh, that's
talking
fine. I have things here also.
about. Sorry.
That's nice. I can go for this.
Pausa. Click, 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 click. Oh, you mix them, man.
You're listening to Chit Chat with Oni, presented by Nine Jaw Radio on Radio Marts. and it won't stop. And it won't stop. With every single part of me, my love for you is constantly forever and ever on repeat, and it won't stop. Every day, I can't wait. You take my breath away from me. Here's my heart, you got the key. Put it on eternity. I love you till infinity, 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 infinity. But every day, and when I think about it, will be making me weak, baby. I won't ever stop. I won't skip a beat, baby. And it'll keep going on, and it won't stop.
tó bá ti ń play music báyìí tí social media ọgbà báyìí wọ́n máa ń yarí ni.
wọ́n yarí yẹn yarí. Ẹ parí sìgá.
With every single part of me, my love for you is constantly forever and ever on repeat, and it won't stop.
Well,
Rocking your body to sleep, and it won't stop. Boom, boom, and it won't stop.
Energy, you got the power now. Nice.
Hey. Oh my God. So, we are back. We are back, and we're still here. We're on the topic of Ukraine and international law and violation, and yeah, just the conflict in general. We are going towards the academic view. This week, what is actually what it is in law and what is being done wrong, and what are the repercussions. No, we're talking about repercussions of actions, because there's action and there's reaction. So in relating to Russians, like I said, in relation to violation that Russian has done, what kind of what action under international ariswa, which we were talking, what can Ukraine claim?
Yes.
And
So
what can international community also do using this
yes.
provision?
Yeah, so these rules on the responsibility of states, they do not themselves contain rules saying you shall not invade or you should be, protect human rights. They are more talking about when has there been a breach of international law? What are the consequences of that? What can you do as a state? Can you claim reparation? Who can claim reparation and all of that? But just taking one step back, I realize we've been talking about the use of force,
Yeah.
which is the rule that they have then allegedly, because of course we are not a court of law
Oh,
here,
yeah,
but it's,
yeah,
it's
yeah.
apparent that they have violated the territorial integrity of,
yeah.
of Ukraine. But there is another set of rules that are very important, and that is that you have on the one hand rules on international law of when can you use force.
Yeah.
And we said that you cannot use force unless you act in self-defense until the UN Security Council decides to act, which would also be lawful then if the Security Council authorizes it.
Yeah.
But when you use force, there are also a whole set of rules that determine how you can use force. And so, for example, there's certain weapons that have been outlawed.
Yeah.
You have also rules of distinction, for example, that you cannot target civilians.
Yeah.
If you have prisoners of war, you must treat them in a certain way. And these rules are called international humanitarian law. And so when so we're talking about the rules that Russia then could be held responsible for is first of all that they used force against Ukraine, but that in using force, now that we see images on TV and on the internet, and we read stories about how they're behaving, then that's another set of rules that they could have violated, that they violated the rules of international humanitarian law. And those rules also apply to Ukraine. When its use of force can be allowed because it's acting in self-defense, but they are not allowed to kill civilians. So they also have to abide by those same set of rules for how to treat prisoners of war and so on. So that's another set of rules that can have been violated. And then yet another set of rules that is always binding on all states is international human rights law. And so you, for example, have a duty under international law that you shall protect the right to life. And if Russia is acting in Ukraine, the duty applies to Russia also in Ukraine, because they then have the duty to protect the rights
So
of
due
the people.
diligence. Is it like a due diligence?
It's a due diligence, but it's also obligations that you may have under customary international law as a state, but also under treaties.
Okay.
And that's another thing that we might talk about after responsibility, because there are certain treaty bodies that are set up in addition to the United Nations Charter. You have the European Convention on Human Rights, and you also have the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, and International Covenant on Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights. And what is actually interesting now is that just recently, I think it was yesterday, the Human Rights Council decided to
take an action
to say that Russia can no longer be a member of the Human Rights Council.
Oh wow!
And
the EU one or
the
worldwide?
international worldwide one.
Okay.
Exactly, and then you have what is called the Council of Europe. They have a court in Strasbourg in France, and they there are more members than the European Union. Russia is also a member of the Council of Europe. And if you're a member of the Council of Europe, you're automatically party to the European Convention on Human Rights.
Automatically.
But now what has happened in March, they decided, I just looked it up before our meeting because I wanted to just see what they said, but it is here. Let me see if I can find it. It says that 16th of March, consequences of the aggression of the Russian Federation against Ukraine. So this is the Council of Europe in Europe that adopted a resolution on the cessation of the membership of the Russian Federation to the Council of Europe. And cessation of the membership. So they are no longer member. Then you can say, oh, well, then they're no longer bound. But of course...
Yeah, right? How does that work? Because if you, like, I'm not a member, so I can do... Does that work like that? Like, if they said they don't want them to be part of them, is it even possible that they can just kick somebody out? How does this...
Yes, exactly. So if they say that they are doing that under Article 8 of the statute of the Council of Europe. And then they say, because this is, of course,
legal,
quite complicated and complex. So they decide that they're on the cessation of the membership of the Russian Federation to agree to come back to the legal and financial consequences resulting from that resolution as a matter of priority. So
what does this mean?
That means that later on they will come together and decide, okay, so what does that mean? They're basically going to answering your question.
So that means there's no answer, but there is consequences. That's what they're saying. Now they're not a member until when they decide what it will be. Kind of.
Yeah, so exactly. So the consequences are going to follow. But, I mean, it's very, very clear that Russia has violated international law. So, and they, as I said, they are the rules of you cannot use force. You have rules on how to use force. So this not shooting civilians and
Civilians,
bombing
bombing
hospitals and so on.
buildings,
Uh,
offices, yeah.
yeah, and also human rights. So and and at the moment when you as a state has violated international law,
Yeah.
you have a duty to stop that wrongful behavior and actually to make reparations for what you have done.
Yeah.
You don't International law doesn't say that you only have a duty to stop or to make reparations at the moment when a court has
Said
ordered
it.
you to do
Yeah.
so.
So you should use your own
Yeah,
common sense, common sense as well
exactly.
as a state.
International law is so that you have certain duties, and if you at a certain moment act in a way that is contrary to that,
Yeah.
you have always the duty to then stop immediately.
Yeah.
And to make good with
With
the
the
wrong that
correct your
did.
wrongdoing.
Yeah,
Correct
exactly.
your wrongdoing.
But then at times states do not do that out of their own goodwill.
Yeah.
Whereas they should.
Yeah.
So then you have a question of, can states then claim or invoke the responsibility of a wrongdoing state?
And by invoke, what does that mean? Like
To invoke is to basically it does not only involve a court, so you don't need to have a court, but you can, for example, as a country, address Russia. So Ukraine could address Russia and say, we invoke your responsibility. We claim that you have violated certain duties vis-a-vis us.
Yeah.
But who can actually claim that responsibility? It is the country that is specially affected, which is Ukraine in this case.
Yeah.
But it can also be, and this is kind of like a novel rule, not that novel, but from 1970 or so, it started to come this idea that there are certain obligations that you owe vis-a-vis the whole international community, and so that if you violate that type of norm, which is called, it's a Latin term, we cannot get around it, it's called obligations erga omnes, which means flowing towards all. It means that all states, even if they were not affected, even if it wasn't their territory that was invaded, or even if it wasn't their citizens who were murdered, they can also invoke the responsibility or claim the responsibility. And use of force and these kind of very important norms, that belongs to that kind of category. So, for example, you see there is a case now where Ghana has claimed the responsibility of Myanmar before the International Court of Justice
for the massive genocide.
For what they've been doing towards their Rohingyas.
Yeah.
And so Ghana, people are saying, well, what does Ghana have to do with Myanmar? Like there's no.
They didn't understand. There's no connection.
Yeah, but that is then that same principle.
Yeah.
That type of obligation, genocide, that is one that actually any state has the interest in that norm being upheld. So that is, it's not just Russia, but of course Russia. It's not just Ukraine.
Ukraine.
That can claim, but any state can do that when it comes to the international responsibility, and then they can claim. I mean, the basic principle then that you're entitled to is, of course, for them to be ordered to stop. But the main remedy is to be put back in the situation as it was.
For Ukraine.
It would have been. Yeah, it would have been if you
before
had
the
not,
war.
Yeah, the situation you would have been in had it not been for the invasion.
Yeah.
So it's also also with interest and so on. So up until if they hadn't invaded you, where would you have been then?
So how can you calculate? Like, for example, so first is the war needs to end before they can even claim this, because first is
they can claim it now. I mean,
already.
I mean, Russia is now in violation. Right, so the moment that they violate the territorial integrity of Ukraine,
immediately,
Ukraine can now claim that you have to stop and you have to, reimburse us. But then it would be, it's always nice if you can have a court that can can also
enforce it.
enforce that, right?
Enforcement, yeah.
And you do have certain conventions where the parties have agreed that the court in The Hague, the International Court of Justice in The Hague, has jurisdiction to decide on disputes. And there you can,
Between states.
between states, exactly. And there you can actually also ask for interim relief.
And interim relief will be
It
like
would be
the
like,
court ordering them to stop.
just to stop. Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
And actually, there is now a case between Iran and the United States.
Yeah.
They no longer have that treaty because Trump ended it.
Yeah.
But up until then, there was this treaty of friendship between Iran and the United States, where it says if there's a dispute about this treaty, then the dispute shall be heard before the Court of Justice in The Hague. And when Trump came with all those sanctions and stepped out of that agreement on nuclear weapons, then there were so many sanctions that Iran said, we cannot get medicine, we cannot get parts to our planes so that we can safely rescue people and so on.
Yeah.
So we need this type of interim relief, and the court actually agreed. Even the American on the bench agreed.
And for example, because we don't have much time, and now we're talking about interim relief, because I know because this case between Russia and Ukraine has been going for so long, and I think there was a case actually that was brought from International Court of Justice.
Whether Georgia maybe,
is it Georgia case? There was something with Russia. I think it's Georgia. Where there's this in case like when, because I didn't see Ukraine filing for this yet from the Court of Justice, and I don't know how long the process is gonna take. For now, like for example, in terms of monetary, can like if they claim certain amount of money now, because how can you calculate how you would have been and what profit you? How does that work then? How can you have a valid claim against them? Like, okay, this is what we used to be and what we could have been. How would it be for Russia? Because how can Ukraine even enforce that? Say you need to pay us, and then Russia. How is this being managed under international law that makes actually the state to pay in the end? How would that work?
Yeah, so ideally, and there is actually been, because the Convention on Genocide Ukraine has filed a case against Russia now, so it's pending.
Okay.
It's pending. There is an order on the request for the indication of provisional measures and so on. So that is an avenue they can take. But what if Russia just, not showing up? We are just gonna ignore this judgment.
Yeah.
That of course makes it difficult, but you do have possibilities where you can have monetary. You can have other countries cooperating in trying to
give you
to
money,
get to
donation.
get that, a donation, but also to assist in Russia
Giving you
fulfilling
back.
its duty to
Okay.
pay back.
So like putting pressure on like the sanctions they're doing now, like by means of sanction to get Russia to do what the Ukrainians want.
Exactly, and so even if Russia would stop doing what it's doing, but it's not making reparations, a court order is also a separate obligation. So that would mean that there would be a continuous breach of international law unless it would actually pay, if it's ordered to pay.
Wow.
So that's that. But then, as I said, there's also this duty on states not for the crime of aggression, and also genocide and on the international criminal law. And so that's another avenue that is now being explored.
For the genocide of the...
And that is something that is not putting Russia before the court.
Yeah.
As they do in the International Court of Justice between states. This is another court in The Hague called the International Criminal Court.
ICJ.
ICC.
Yeah,
exactly.
ICC.
And there it would be then the people who actually then
That is
murdered or ordered or
or the individual that takes part in the ordering of these people are the one that is going to face criminal.
Yeah, exactly.
ICC.
Exactly, and so that is ongoing now, and they are gonna and they might then end up behind bars, because like you saw with the former criminal tribunal for the former Yugoslavia, and so on, Sierra Leone, and so on. So that that will happen, and then it's a matter of trying to get those most responsible.
To
And
face
of course,
that.
they will try to stay away from being caught, but countries also have a duty to extradite them.
Them. Okay.
So they just cannot travel
As they want.
easy as they want.
Oh,
Exactly. Yeah.
thank you so much. It time flies. I'm looking like we have like 3 minutes now. Before we go, and thank you so much for the insight, and it's so much topic we could go on and
We
on
could.
about it. But now we are in the takeaway. Like now is the like you have like I think 2 minutes.
2 minutes.
Yeah, 2 minutes. So if people don't remember this, and they like we've talked so much about law and things on international law and Ukraine crisis, what do you want them to take away from this conflict? Like from you, like when they remember your take on this, what would it be? If they don't remember everything, what they remember, like oh, Dr. Eke said this.
Well,
What it is?
I have my professional view, and I have also my own personal view that I find this absolutely horrific. On a personal level, I'll start there. We started the program talking about the International Moot Court we were part of. 2 years ago, I went there with students from the University of Amsterdam to actually plead against other countries in Kiev, and we had the time of our life. It was just wonderful to be in Kiev, and meeting a friend of ours who lives there, and she's now fleeing, and I just could not have imagined this. There was been a lot of talk, but that actually this is happening. It's horrific. On the legal part of it, it is easy to think that, well, if a country that has a lot of power is just able to violate international law, what does international law then even mean?
Yeah.
I hope that maybe one of the takeaways is from what we've been talking about
Today,
today is
yeah.
that there is international law. At least we can know what is right and what is wrong, and also that there are certain tools at our disposal that we can use. And now it's our job to use those tools, but also to improve the system, perhaps to make it even more effective.
Better.
And that would include the Security Council. I think.
Effectively.
Mm.
Thank you so much, guys. It's like wow. Thank you, Dr. Ege, for being here, taking your time out of being busy in the day teaching, and still here talking about
No, I'm very
the topic
passionate,
you love
about this,
about
but,
international law and even addressing this crisis. You make a lot of light in terms of what like people know what it is, but legally you explained because people think international law there is no awareness, but you say there is rules and there are violations and there are tools to be used under international law, and it is existing. International law does work. So, and on behalf of everybody in the studio, Dr. Ege, I said thank you on behalf of Match Radio, Mr. Johnson, my partner in crime and my boss, and the Niger Radio, everybody listening, thank you so much for taking time and being here every week. And like I said, I promise it's going to be exciting, but you never know what you meet. So I'm going to say thank you, and I'll see you next week. Remain blessed. Tschüss. Mwah.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
that was nice. That went quick.
That was quick, it's
Yeah.
like actually like, sometimes when they say people say like 2 hours is so long. It's like,
Oh no, no.
I say 2 hours it goes so far. Not really.
Yeah, but I was also late. I'm sorry
Yeah,
about
no,
that.
but then yeah, but then it was fine. I was thinking like
No, no, of course I
when
was
you called me, I was thinking you're far away. I knew like
Hey
it's my thing.
guys.
Thank you so much, guys, for coming.
Hey guys, thanks for watching and keep on following us and we'll see and listen to more things that is going around the world. Yeah, we are ready to give you back to back anytime, any day, that you see what we're going on. We love you. Keep on following us on Max Radio, Niger Radio, and Max Radio in the Netherlands. We love you all. Have a blessed day and have a blessed weekend and enjoy yourself. And keep the peace from your heart
Thank you,
to the
Bella.
neighbor, to
Yeah.
everybody. Keep the peace. Have a nice day. Bye.
Yeah. Yeah, these are my colleagues. Yeah. So I work with
Eh, why you have
residents.
to?
Yeah, we're gonna. I thought we were here because I follow us. You make the picture for you. Oh, yeah, because you don't want to be yeah, the mask. So then you don't say let's remove the mask.
Listening to our favorite song when you said you loved a
Oh, yeah, we
mess.
we
Let's
just
I
go.
come
whispered
to the side.
underneath my breath, but you heard it, darling. You look perfect tonight.
Yes, my lady, I'm ready.
Well, I found a woman stronger than anyone I know.
Yes, it,
She
yes.
shares my dreams. I hope that someday I'll share her home. I found a
Man,
love
láti ní wà hàn, ó
to
láti wà
carry
hàn ní kò ti
more than
save.
just a
Yeah,
secret,
then you talk after
to
the
carry
straight, yeah.
love, to carry children of our own. We are still kids, but we're so
Yeah, I'm ready for the talking.
old.
Daar wilde Maart en
If you
Ruud
want to
door
sleep, you
sturen.
want to stand.
Op die manier kan de politie beter bepalen hoeveel mensen er op hun
Hier
is.
in de studio
Dit zorgt
Praga.
zoals mogelijk ook voor een grotere pakkans van de individuen en verhoogt de veiligheid van zowel
I will stay
politiepersoneel als
coffee shop
burgers.
with Max
Er wordt
Frost
al
and
eerder
come on
geoefend op een
the
afgesloten terrein in
Okay,
Enschede met
let's do this.
gesimuleerde
I've
situaties.
seen
Als het
Okay,
goed
more
gaat, wordt het
than
mooie in de praktijk
alright.
getest.
Uh,
Sinds deze maand worden
okay,
2000
maybe the man will have
statushouders
enough.
ondergebracht in hotels.
Okay,
Thank you
let's go.
guys
Volgens
for
van deze
joining, and
wordt
then
het
we'll see
beleid
you
dat
next
geniet wordt
week.
voor
And
ruimte in
say
asielzoekerscentra.
bye bye.
In het
Oh
begin
my
van
god,
deze week is de
bye.
ordenshouding die nog in een AZC